February 25th, 2021 to order. We have 3 presentations this morning. The first is our presentation on diversity, equity, and inclusion next steps. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force has an update for you this evening, and that presentation will be given to you by your city clerk, Becky Behrens.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Next Steps. This presentation will go over a general overview of the Human Relations Commission, the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, the facilitated listening session, as well as recommendations from the staff perspective and the facilitated listening session. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so to start off, we have the Human Relations Commission. This commission was created by ordinance in 1964, and it's gone through several mergers. One was with the Fair Housing Committee in 1974, and most recently was the Citizens with Disabilities Advisory Board in 2018. Their current membership is made up of 7 regular citizen volunteer members and 1 police department advisory member. The purpose of this commission is to foster mutual understanding and respect among diverse groups and prevent discrimination. And they do this through their community efforts and cooperation and just trying to have an overall better understanding of the groups and individuals that live in our community. They also formulate and carry out educational programs which aid in eliminating and preventing discrimination and intolerance. This group has the ability to investigate complaints relating to discrimination and intolerance, as well as they are able to hold hearings and collect the data related to those investigations. And finally, they do have the ability to make reports to the council regarding, again, the elimination of discrimination and intolerance, as well as furthering policies and practices when it comes to fair housing and accessibility. And just for a general reference, whenever we're referencing the elimination or prevention of discrimination and intolerance, they're primarily focusing on race, creed, color, religion, national origin, sex, ancestry, age, gender identity, sexual orientation, genetic information, and/or disability. So that takes us into our Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. This task force was created in November of 2019 by the mayor. And initially, this group was created due to some community concern surrounding the city's stance on diversity and inclusion. Prior to the creation of this committee, there was an internal meeting with several concerned community citizens, as well as a group called the Community of Concerned Citizens, which is an activist group created in 1982. And they sat down with the mayor, as well as several city staff members, to discuss not only the city's stance on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also to talk about some situations that had happened during public meetings, and they wanted to have this open dialogue. So this, in turn, created the Diversity Inclusion Task Force. That current membership is created of 7 community members and 4 staff members. And of those 7 community members, 1 is also a Human Relations Commission member, and 3 are members of the Community of Concerned Citizens. So the primary focus for this group was to make recommendations to address issues surrounding a 1987 MOU, which was entered into with the Community of Concerned Citizens in the City of Independence. And you'll see in your packets, I did provide that presentation, which was provided to council in February. Not only did they review the MOU, they were also tasked with looking at the city's boards and commissions application, as well as just overall helping the city move forward with diversity and inclusion work. And as I stated, the information was provided in your packet regarding the study session presentation that was done in February of 2020, but the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force did provide recommendations regarding that MOU, and they did update the boards and commissions application, which now includes several demographic features when people fill out that application. So prior to getting to this slide for the facilitated listening session, overall, the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, after they accomplished their primary tasks of reviewing the MOU, as well as reviewing the boards and commissions application, they really needed they were going to need a permanent home. Because they were a task force, their objectives and goals, once they were completed, that task force really met the end of its time. So it was a suggestion from the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force to have the facilitated listening session. And with the support of the council and the manager's office in September of 2020, we started the RFQ process. We did receive 2 responses to that RFQ process and overall selected Mid-America Regional Council. And they did facilitate the 4-hour listening session, which was held on November 17th, 2020. So this session was attended by not only members of the Human Relations Commission, but also by members of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And a general overview of the agenda, the beginning meeting setup was learning and development. So overall, what this did was this really set a tone for that day. It provided foundational information regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as provided pretty strong examples of how other organizations come to diversity, equity, and inclusion and what they do in their organizations. Next was data mining, which these 2 groups never previously hadn't had any experiences together, so they didn't have shared meetings or anything like that. So this was really an opportunity for them to be able to share their experiences as being part of the Human Relations Commission, as well as being part of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. Next was aggregating the data. So this was essentially them creating short-term and long-term goals for their respective groups. And then finally, determining a structure for next steps, which were their overall recommendations. And a little bit more on aggregating the data. Throughout the session, we came to learn that the Human Relations Commission, they're very community focused, and they have focused a lot of their attention and efforts not only on aiding in housing issues, but also advocating for disability rights. And some of their action items that came out of this session, which are essentially the things that they thought would allow them to further their mission and goals, were education and outreach. So essentially in this section, they really want to be able to continue to engage with the community, and they think they can do that by means of marketing, whether that be through social media or posters or what have you. But they really want to be able to continue to reach out to the public and to be given the opportunities to provide education to them. Open lines of communication with the city. So essentially, they just want to make sure that they have someone that they can talk to. So if they have comments, questions, or the concerns, they know exactly who they can go to. And there's, for lack of better terms, not a lot of red tape to get to that person. Consistent schedulings of meetings. Currently, this group, they meet quarterly. And in order to be able to achieve objectives and goals, they do feel that they need to be meeting more frequently to do that. The next 3 items, they really go hand in hand, and these are their clear goals and objectives, updating mission and purpose, and having a written course of action. So they just want it outlined for them what their goals and objections are how are they supposed to achieve those, and they just want it to be clear moving forward. And then finally, they want the ability to continue to create subcommittees. They think that in order to be able to focus on specific areas, that subcommittees can help them further that mission. And the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, their primary focus has been cultural and organizational shifts regarding DEI work. They're not only focused on City of Independence as an organization, but they're also focused on the community as a whole. And really what they're trying to do is just make sure that not only are we being inclusive, but we are doing more than just saying. So we might be saying that we're inclusive and we're doing all of these things, but we're also showing it. So whenever people come into our community, they know that we're inclusive and that we accept everyone who comes, whether it's to work, to visit, to shop. That's kind of our brand, if you will. And then also transparency of policies. They think it's quite important to make sure that if we do have policies for the City of Independence, that we are transparent, that we're putting them online, that they're easily accessible to the public. And what their action items are and how they get these things done is they have to be a permanent board. They no longer really fit in the task force model, so they either have to be a permanent board by themselves or they have to be merged with another board. And they still want to continue to be able to provide recommendation on policy change. So they've definitely provided recommendation regarding the MOU with the community of concerned citizens. And they've also looked over some of our internal policies, such as our police policies, and they've been able to provide recommendation on that. So they would like to be able to do that continuing. And then some of the overlap that you can see here with the Human Relations Commission is the community engagement piece and expanding education outreach. Now with the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, education and outreach isn't just siloed to what we're doing now and today for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it also focuses on foundational and historical awareness and more of a how we got to where we are now. So this takes us into the listening section recommendations. Their first recommendation is to consolidate the DEI work under a single advisory committee. And in doing that, they do want to revisit and review the mission and vision for the commission so it is encompassing of both groups. And again, to address specific goals, they are interested in looking down the avenue of creating subcommittee and establishing work groups. Next would be to establish communication protocols to ensure support from city leadership and alignment with city organizational goals. So again, this all ties into knowing who they can talk to get things done and not having that red tape to get through to be able to achieve their goals. They want to be able to provide periodic reports to the council. And finally, they'd like to find funding for necessary DEI work. The next major objective would be to hire a DEI officer. And this position would essentially support the Human Relations Commission by identifying and executing the goals of that commission. And then finally, the last big item on the list would be to adopt best practices from DEI initiatives in peer communities. So then this takes us into our staff recommendations. It is supportive that we consolidate the DEI work under Human Relations Commission. So that would mean the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force and the Human Relations Commission would become one. Essentially, this would make it a 13-person commission with the support of the council. Once they're merged, they should review mission and vision for the board just to make sure to not only appropriately represent both groups, but so that it is clear what their goals and objectives are. Work groups and subcommittees is supported. With that, though, it would be contingent on how many subcommittees they are looking to create, because as far as a resource issue with staff would have to be able to provide the resources to staff each of those subcommittees if they were to have meetings. Instead of the 4 meetings a year, it would be beneficial for them to go ahead and start meeting 6 times a year to be able to continue to move their mission forward. And then establishing communication protocols to ensure support from city leadership and alignment with city organizational goals. I mean, opening that line of communication is important to make sure that not only are they achieving their objectives and goals, but they are in line with the city and that we're part of that process. And then part of that would be to provide annual reports to the council, which is, again, one of their recommendations. I don't think there's any argument that adopting best practices is the next step to moving forward. And then finally, in order to gain the most support for this initiative, this is all going to be housed moving forward under the city manager's office. They're going to oversee the Human Relations Commission and any internal programs regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And part of that would be to create an internal group, creative city employees to support the Human Relations Commission and also support that internal diversity, inclusion, and equity work. And some of the first tasks of that internal group could be to review the recommendations of the MOU, that the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force had presented back in February, as well as the listening session recommendations from November. And that is my presentation if you guys have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Comments or questions from the council? Okay, I have, well, first of all, I want to thank all of those who participated in this process. It's been going on quite a long time. Members of our staff, especially our city clerk, who's really quarterbacked this through the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, through the listening session, which the council had voted to fund that, to have that facilitated, and certainly our citizen volunteers on both the Human Relations Commission, the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, who have participated in this. I do think that this is, in looking at a variety of different ways to include these functions, I do think that the recommendation to create this combined group is probably the most feasible for our city at this point in time. I think some of these recommendations are things that we're going to have to grow into. I don't believe that we're in a position to hire a diversity officer at this point. I know that's a position that is recommended in many places to really do an incredible bang-up job. I don't know that that's realistic for us at this point in time, but certainly it can be something that we can establish as a goal. I do like having this overseen by the city manager's office because it effectively will touch every department and as well as the council. And I think that that's probably the most effective, is to have it in an office that has that type of authority in every department. Mr. City Manager, my question to you is, what action are you seeking from the council this evening? Are you asking for our approval to proceed with these recommendations and bring together the formation of this group? That would be step one, and then allowing them to begin meeting to develop goals and align with the council's strategic planning, which we will be continuing later this week.
Yes, Mayor, that would be our request tonight, and in my discussions with the clerk, who has done an excellent job of shepherding this topic to this point, having the council take that formal action at an upcoming meeting of establishing the Human Relations Commission in this form and with this scope would be the important critical next step, and then that group becoming the accountability mechanism for implementation of these recommendations moving forward, and at which time we would come back to the council and seek approval for items as necessary.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then if there's no objection, we will have the city clerk prepare an item for an upcoming council agenda so that we can officially vote on formulating this group and they can begin working on these items. Okay, next, Mr. City Manager, is fiscal years 2022-2026 General Fund Financial Forecast Update.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to be giving this presentation, so 1 minute while I get my screen shared. Okay, tonight's presentation, as mentioned, is going to be a look at both our current year fiscal position as well as our 5-year financial forecast, primarily focusing on the general fund, as that is our largest and most diverse fund here at the City of Independence. Tonight I'll be giving you a broad economic outlook as that really impacts our own financial picture. Let you know what the 5-year model is forecasting for the years ahead. We'll talk within the current fiscal year about what our major revenues are and how those are performing, as well as some of our key expenditures and what we're seeing on that horizon there. Before we get to our own financial picture, again, I think it's important to understand what's happening with the national trends. One of the first and most important places to look is with unemployment. Unemployment is doing better than it was earlier in the spring of 2020. At this point, we have recovered about 55% of the jobs that were lost at the peak of the economic shutdown. But recent months are showing that the recovery has begun to stall. As some of the economic restrictions have been reimposed in the interest of public health, we are beginning to see a slowing of the economy in the latter half of 2020. Interestingly, just at a statewide level here in Missouri, Missouri lost about 346,000 jobs back in April of 2020. At this point, we've recovered about 2/3 of those jobs. That decline in March and April, just to give you an idea of how significant that was, that dropped the state of Missouri to their employment levels that they saw in 1996. So basically, 25 years worth of job growth was wiped out in about 60 days or less. Here in the Kansas City area, a little more locally, our region is starting to see a return to some normalcy. Our unemployment rate has steadily declined since the April peak, and it's now about 2% below the nation's unemployment rate. But again, that has begun to stall out in the latter half of 2020 as some of those public health restrictions were reimposed both nationally and at the statewide and local level. Really can't talk about the economic picture without mentioning the stimulus bill. The stimulus has been a key part of the economic picture since about April. And at the tail end of 2020, there was a renewal of some of those measures. Just a couple of quick highlights for you. Individuals will be receiving a $600 federal stimulus and then another $600 for any of their qualified dependents. We've seen an extension on the moratorium on evictions through the end of January, though I believe the Biden administration now plans to extend that further into the calendar year. Federal unemployment benefits are being made available until March 14th. And there's been a significant infusion of financial aid for some of the hardest hit sectors in the economy, particularly around entertainment and agricultural industries. Billions of dollars made available for some of the most critical of needs like rent assistance, food assistance, and child care assistance. And then, of course, other funds made available for transit, educational needs, and vaccine distribution. Locally, we are beginning to see what many economists are referring to now as a K-shaped recovery, like the letter K. And really what that means is that for those who are in the upper middle class workers, or those making over $60,000 a year, for that worker, the economic recovery has mostly been completed. Unemployment there is only down about 1.6%. People who are in that middle range of $27,000 to $60,000 of annual earnings, they're about 3.9% unemployment rate down from where they were in April. But for the worker who is defined as the low income or low wage worker, those below $27,000 annually, that's still down 17.2% in employment from where it was prior to the April drop off. Just to give you an idea of where independents would fall in that range, our median or average income in 2019 was estimated to be $59,000. So I think that gives you an idea that we are on, somewhat steady financial ground, but by no means is this recession over for our community, our workers, and the people who live here. Taking a quick look at what's going on with the economy here in Missouri, we have gone from a miserable situation to a bad situation. Really have a very long way to go, clearly at this point. Consumer spending, which is going to be a very key part of our economic recovery, that is still down 10% in Missouri relative to the pre-COVID levels. And small business revenue, and we all know how important small business is to independents, that revenue is down 30% in Missouri relative to the pre-COVID levels. And I just cannot stress this enough. Recovering from this recession is really going to be contingent on getting the consumer back to their old habits. So once consumer confidence returns, consumers start spending, that's when we're going to see this picture start to stabilize again. Friday of this week is when we'll receive more data and statistics about consumer spending and about small business growth. But those statistics are expected to be sluggish as they'll reflect Q4 of 2020. So that decline in consumer activity really began to, take hold the latter part of the year, which is typically when we like to see the consumer out spending with their holiday shopping and when many retailers rely on consumer spending to make their year-end profit margins. So that data will be interesting, but we're not expecting any robust news out of that. All right, so with that economic picture in mind, we're going to talk quickly now about our 5-year forecast and our current financial position for this fiscal year. Again, I'll remind the council that our general fund really is contingent on 3 major revenue sources that make up 62% of our budget. That is our payment in lieu of taxes that we receive from our sale of utilities. That's our sales tax revenue from brick and mortar establishments within independents, and then our franchise fees, which are the fees on things like gas, electric service outside of the IPL territory, and then cable and telephone fees as well. Those represent, again, 62% of our budget, and overall the general fund is about $74 million this past year in revenues. So let's talk about a couple of the key revenue sources and how they're performing. Property tax, this is really going to be expected to be flat for the coming year. 2020, our assessed valuation declined primarily as a result of all the tax appeals from 2019. We are going to assume a slower pace of growth based on both that decline, and then had a call with the Jackson County assessor last week where they said, 2021, which is a reassessment year, they are expecting that to show very little growth, again, because of the impacts of COVID. Not a lot of economic activity, so not a lot of appreciated value with properties this year. So we're not expecting a significant bump in property tax revenues this year. So we're going to hold this revenue source flat. Sales tax is a very good piece of news for us. We budgeted our sales tax figures to be down this current fiscal year based on all of the economic forecast data that we were getting. We took a very cautious approach with that, but I am pleased to report that our sales tax revenue is expected to be up by close to $2 million this year. It seems what has happened is that consumer spending didn't totally evaporate, it just shifted. So folks went away from some of those leisure activities like travel and entertainment and hotel stays, and they're spending that money more now on home goods, home improvements, quality of life items. So we have benefited in that regard from that shift in consumer spending. And for the year ahead, we are going to go ahead and budget an increase in our sales tax based on some of that shifting behavior that we've seen. So you can see that for the year ahead, we'll have a moderate sales tax increase there in our revenue figures. The use tax is probably the best news that I have to share with the council tonight. The voter-approved use tax was to fund the animal shelter operations up to $750,000 and the hiring of up to 30 new sworn officers in the Independence Police Department. Between those two, to satisfy that ballot requirement, we estimate that the use tax would need to generate $3.75 million annually before those funds would begin to waterfall or flow to their originating sales tax fund. At this point in time, we are forecasting that those collections are going to far exceed that necessary requirement. In fact, we are estimating that the use tax is going to generate annually $4.4 million. So under that assumption, that would mean that $665,000 would begin to waterfall to those originating sales tax funds. For the general fund, because our presentation is focused on that tonight, that share of revenue would be about $296,000 annually, which just about makes up the difference of what we're expected to lose from the announced closing of the JCPenney's and Macy's department store, their sales tax revenue from those two stores. So this is good news not only for the general fund, but the other, parks, police, fire, stormwater, and street sales tax as well. So there's the good news. Now I'll start to kind of share a little bit of the glass half empty news with you. Our payment in lieu of taxes revenue, again, these are the revenues we receive from our sale of electricity, water, and sewer services. We're expecting that to trend slightly upward, but I will admit I am continuing to take an optimistic outlook with this. Right now, as the council and the community knows, we are 60 days behind on our billing. And with the pandemic, there are many in our community who are having a difficult time making ends meet, and we have now fully spent the $2.2 million in CARES Act funds that helped buoy many in our community's ability to pay their utility bills. So at this time, we are estimating and forecasting that we will meet our projections, that will be made whole on that, but I think the council can see where there could be an opportunity for some dark clouds to shadow this optimistic outlook we have right here. Unfortunately, there really isn't much cause for optimism with our utility franchise fees. Again, some of the main sources here, our sale of gas, for example, customers who are Aspire customers. Though it is cold, it's not been as cold as it has historically been, so we are not collecting the normal franchise fees that we might historically expect to see because sale of gas is down. The other big impact here are those who are cutting the cord on both telephone and cable in favor of using a cell phone and streaming video services. We don't receive any kind of franchise fee on those cell phone sales or the streaming service sales. So as that trend continues to go down, we can just expect this to be a sale or a source of revenue that's not going to be as strong as it was in the past. So you can see here we are expecting our franchise fees where we budgeted at $8.8 million to only come in at slightly over $7 million this year. Fines and forfeitures, we are expecting those to be down close to $1.8 million. There are two causes for that. One, of course, is that for a period of time, the court was closed due to COVID-19, and they're still operating with slightly reduced hours, though not as much as they were. But that did create a backlog in the court that they're working through. So right now, that revenue source is down significantly. But a trend that is not going away as of now are the residual impacts of Senate Bill 5. And again, for the community's sake, Senate Bill 5 was legislation that was adopted in 2015 in response to the civil unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. That took away circuit court's ability to suspend a driver's license for failure to appear on a moving violation. The problem that we've seen with this is this has taken away any reason or compelling cause for those who have been cited for a moving violation to come to court and or pay their fine. And so without that compelling mechanism, we have seen a year-over-year decline in this revenue source. The council will recall that this is one of our top agenda items for the current legislative session in Jefferson City, and we'll continue to pursue that. Charges for services, some of the significant revenues in this are transit fees. You can probably guess that with the economic restrictions and the encouragement to avoid contact with others, the use of our IndyBus transit service is down. So those revenue collections are also down substantially. We're also seeing a decline in our code enforcement revenues. Again, probably tied to the fact that court is behind on their dockets there. And then finally, charges for service also reflect TIF revenues that we get a management fee on, our administration fee. So again, shopping being down, people not being out shopping at those brick and mortar stores, particularly in the TIF districts. our administrative fees there are also down. So all told, those charges for services are down about $1 million. Let's talk quickly about our expenditures. Our expenditures in the City of Independence, about 81% of those are related to personnel costs. So only 16% of our budget is related to actual operating expenses. So again, people are our most important and expensive cost that we have as a business. The 5-year model, we have built into that all of our known expenditures and our collective bargaining agreements and the benefits associated with that. But I've also built in a 2% cost of increase for all of our other non-represented employees and a 1% increase for other operating expenses. I think it's important to try to remember that we are trying to both recruit and retain high caliber employees. And the last few years, we've either done a 0 or 1% cost of living increase. So to stay competitive, we are going to need to build this in and around our budget. And so I've built that into the assumption in the out years for our model. So just very quickly, current fiscal year, you can tell our budgeted revenues and estimates were about 74 million. In actuality, those are both trending closer to 72.8 million. So both of those are down this year. When you net out the places we're up in revenue, the places we're down, and then with our expenditures, we have some areas where we were significantly up, but we've benefited to this point from the CARES Act, which helped offset some of those unbudgeted expenses. We are down, but even on both expenditures and revenues. Couple of big things, though, that are going to impact the budget, both in the current year and moving forward. Healthcare costs. As the council knows, the city is a self-funded health insurance program, and healthcare costs for everybody, private and public sectors, are going up markedly. The city contributes 80% of those premium costs to the plan. The Stay Well Committee, in consultation with our insurance advisor, CBIZ, are carefully reviewing this right now, but I would forewarn that a premium increase is probably going to be necessary in the coming year in order to stabilize that fund. Costs are increasing more substantially as claims are increasing relative to the revenues coming into the plan. So both the council and employees should be prepared to have that conversation soon. Transit is a major expense in this budget, as we discussed last year, and one that is heavily subsidized. We benefited last year from federal CARES Act funds to help close that gap, but that was a one-time cash infusion, not something we're going to be able to count on in the future. And we have some known cost increases to our transit contract coming up in the out years, which are only going to exacerbate that gap. And then, of course, I put union negotiation and service levels here just because, our people and our programs are always going to have cost increases over time, so we're going to need to be cognizant of that as well. So what does that all mean when you plug it into our model? Well, in the current fiscal year, I'm pleased to report to the council that if everything holds as we're forecasting right now, we are expecting to end this current fiscal year in the general fund with a slight surplus of $34,000. Doesn't sound like a lot, but put that in context. Last year, due to the COVID-19 fallout, the general fund lost $1.2 million, drew down its fund balance by $1.2 million. With that $34,000 increase, we expect the unassigned fund balance to end the year at $5.3 million. And as a reminder, our adopted reserve policy says we should be at 16% of revenues, which means we would need to be at about $11.9 million. So we're about $6.6 million short of where we need to be to hit our reserve policy. We're going to have to make additional adjustments over that 5-year horizon to meet that goal. As you can see, without any changes in the next 2 years, this general fund will be in the negative in its fund balance. I will remind the council that we have greatly reduced our staff sizes these last 5 years. We have consolidated several city departments. We have either reduced or eliminated a number of our programs and services. And we've made strong changes to our employee and retiree benefit programs and even had wage freezes in this past year. So while we've done a lot to control our expenses, my strong recommendation is that we continue to look for ways to grow our revenues, particularly the things that will bring additional visitors employers and citizens into our community so that we can have the cash necessary to meet our ongoing expenses. Certainly not to say that we won't want to be cognizant of those expenses, but I think we've spent a lot of time working on our expenditures and now need to look at that revenue picture. I'll conclude tonight with just a couple of thoughts. We need to continue to monitor those revenues and expenditures, particularly over the next 6 months for this fiscal year. While there's reason to be cautiously optimistic, there's certainly some areas where the bottom could drop out. So we'll want to be mindful and thoughtful of that. But based on the optimistic position we're in, my intent is to bring a resolution to the City Council, and actually that will be an ordinance just based on the way we've done it to this point, but an ordinance to the February 1st meeting that would defer the remaining $12.5 million authority that the council granted as an emergency loan back in April for COVID. Originally that was $25 million. Late 2020, we reduced that amount in half to $12.5 million. I'm confident we will not need that to make our budget goals for the rest of this fiscal year. So I'll be recommending deferring that authority at that time. And then we'll begin to prepare that budget that we will submit to you in early May. That's going to be a very fiscally conservative budget. I think there's a couple places where we see revenues increasing, but other places where it's down. So this will be a maintenance budget and one where we'll need to be very conservative in our approach. So Mayor, with that, I am happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. Questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Karen DeLucci. Zach, you mentioned that we're 60 days behind on the billing. Can you give the citizens an update on where we are and when they can expect a bill and all that? Absolutely.
So we have over 25 different billing cycles that we do for our 56,000 customers. So there's groupings. When I say cycles, there's groupings. Our intent right now is to make sure that everybody gets a red bill. We don't want to do estimates because estimates can present further issues down the road. And as the council will remember, a customer's sewer bill is based on their winter average usage. So it's really important that we get those actual reads right now. What we've been doing to try to make sure everybody gets an actual read is doubling up our meter readers on their cycles. So we are having double the workforce to go into each of those billing cycles. Customers who have not received one yet, continue to look daily. We are working diligently to get that to you. I know we got ours. We did not receive one at my home from November 9th onward until last week we got ours at my home. So they are trickling out. And they are coming. When they do come, that number may be large as it's going to be 60 days behind. Please contact customer service so that you can make payment arrangements as needed as your situation dictates.
Is that a telephone call or can they go online to approach customer service?
They could do both. And I know our director who oversees utility billing, Dan Montgomery, is on the call. Dan, would you help me with my senior moment here and remind us what that number is?
Yes, it's 325-793. Let me check it, make sure I don't give the wrong number out because I don't call it either. So hold on just a second. 325-7930.
Say it one more time, Dan.
257930. And to answer your question about the billing, so we're reading cycle 17 and 18, there's 20 cycles, and we build cycles 1 through 10, 11 are already out. So by the end of the month, we'll be in cycle 20 and hopefully have that read and then build shortly thereafter as soon as we can review those bills. So it still may take a few days into the month, through the end of the month to get those bills out. So just have patience.
And Zach, I just simply can't remember. I know that we waive late fees and things of that nature, but like if I get hit with an $800 bill and I usually have, 10 or 15 days to pay, are arrangements available to me to extend the payment schedule for paying that $800 bill?
They are. Dan, would you speak to what our arrangement policy is?
So we'll continue to have the same amount of time that you would get to normally pay the bill. So you're going to have 20 days, to pay your bill anyway. And then on top of that, we'll make arrangements for a couple months afterwards. So whatever works for the customers, it's not their fault that we couldn't get a bill out to them. So we're working with them, waiving all penalties, credit card fees, everything about it. So we'll work with the customer.
Thank you very much.
Councilwoman, you raised a good point too. I would also like to reiterate that as of now, through the end of February, in response to the health crisis, the city has waived late fees for non-payment. And of course, the council has indefinitely suspended the credit card convenience fees for customers as well. So a few things that we've tried to do to ease the burden and certainly a very challenging time.
And one other question on an unrelated topic. I know that we were talking about the general fund having to put $200,000 into the stay well fund in order to shore that money up through the next few months. Has that occurred? Are you anticipating that occurring?
So what's happening right now is the council at the very end of 2020 approved an agreement with a new third-party insurance advisor, which is a local company called CBiz. That company is partnering with our employee advisory committee that's known as the Stay Well Committee. They're doing a deep dive financial analysis on the fund to understand what kind of gap we have over the next 6 months until we reach the new fiscal year. At that time, we'll have a better understanding of what that deficit might potentially be and have a cash infusion made that would not involve a premium increase. But our thought on this at this time is that we would do a cash infusion from the respective funds to help support that. And that is built into the model that I showed you tonight. That assumption is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, welcome. Yes, go ahead.
Before Dan slips out of there, are we communicating with folks out here, ratepayers on the power and light bill and stuff, that some of these people are getting quite a few complaints that, they did the averaging and all this stuff, that some of these bills are actually more than 60 days old or 60 days back. They could be 70, 80, depending on when that cycle's read. And there's a little bit more out there than just a 60-day deal out there. I don't think people understand that they really need to look at their bills and make sure that it's just not 60 days. It could be 70. It could be 80, I guess. I don't know. Are you running into quite a bit of that?
Yes, the ones I've been seeing lately have been about 72 days. So it's anywhere from 60 to 72. I think we initially just started talking about a 2-month bill where they could understand that, but it's definitely a much larger bill. That's why we're making all kinds of arrangements. And the other thing that I'll mention is the billing system prorates bills. So it's not just a one-for-one cost. I think the only break that you're really getting is the sewer bill has a $12 a month fee on there that since it's only one bill, then they're only getting that one $12 bill. We're not hitting them with a $24 bill. But other than that, they're prorated. So they seem a lot higher just because the way the billing system works, it prorates bills. And then after we follow this 72-day bill, we may have a 23-day or 25-day bill to get everything back in sync. So next month, look for a smaller bill.
Dan, in the same, this Mike Steinmeier, in the same way that you urge some patience on our side, I would encourage your staff to use extreme patience to work with folks for whatever. I mean, I haven't received a bill since November yet, and I don't even know that I want to open my bill, to be honest with you, because both my wife and I are self-employed. We took a big hit income-wise last year, and I'll be the first to say it's been a challenge, and so there are people that I know that are worried about being able to catch up. So my suggestion and advice back to you is to demonstrate great patience with the ratepayers, because I think we are being very patient without needing some type of psychiatric treatment when we see these bills. So I'm not excited to see mine at all. So that's my desire from you, and I know you will, but just please emphasize to your staff that we're.
Yeah, our staff's been doing really good job, because I'm sure they've been tested also, and I'm like you, I'm in billing cycle 20, so I'll be the last to see my bill. So, but you can make payments ahead of time if you want, but we're not pushing for that. If you do make a payment ahead of time, it will be credited on your bill when it goes out, so show as a credit. So
Yeah.
if that helps some people, it helps them budget their money if they go ahead and make a payment.
Sure. And I, just so you know, I've gone online a few times and I see my balance is 0. So hallelujah. I'll just remind the utilities of that when they want money from me, that nope, my balance was 0. I don't have to pay, right?
Right. Yeah, we're not
Sure.
asking people to do that.
I'll get my kerosene lanterns out.
If we can't get, since we can't get, as soon as we get the billing out, then your bill will show up out there. So in the meantime, you're just seeing what it was in November. So yeah, I'm not shocked that it's 0 right now.
I'm excited. Well, I guess I can wait and ask Zach other questions if other council members have questions for you.
The only thing that I just wanted to remark on, as Zach mentioned, we have right now a suspension of any late fees, I think through through the end of February. So that's just something that we're just going to have to continue to track, and if necessary, consider extending that a bit further. I haven't received a bill either, but I do go ahead and make a payment so I don't faint when my bill does show up. But you know, we're dealing, of course, with numerous things here, as Zach has said in his economic overview. Just generally, we still have a lot of folks out there who just are, you know, plain having a hard time with unemployment or different employment, or having to leave their employment to take care of family or school from home, or whatever the situation may be. I know that there is a large stimulus package coming that may be able to allow us to assist some more with housing and utilities. So we'll await that, and we're working with United Way and Community Services League to watch that very, very closely. So there's a variety of circumstances, but Dan will just certainly keep on top of this, and if we need to consider extending that beyond the end of February, which I'm just going to venture a guess we probably will, then, you know, we can make sure that we don't miss that deadline. So that was all I had to say on utilities. I did have another couple questions for the same manager, but Mr. Steinmeier, Councilman, if you'd like to proceed, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Zach, I appreciate what you're forecasting. I'm glad that you're optimistic. I don't know that I share all the optimism of our revenue challenges that are coming. You know, there's a lot of discussion about the rebound in the job market, but, you know, like Forbes, I was reading a Forbes article that says that the labor market is far worse than the 140,000 because of jobs lost in December. And it's mainly because there's 2 categories that aren't looked at a lot, and that's the U3 and the U6, where these are a lot of part-time, former full-time that are now part-time, and another category that is marginally connected to the labor market. And I think we have a lot of that in our city, and that's the only reason why I bring it up, is I think we have a lot of the people that fall into the U3 and the U6, and then of course we know that if they just stop looking, they fall off of the map, right? There's no way to track that number. And I think, you know, as I go around the city and do business, I run into people that are working 2 and 3 part-time jobs, and maybe it's just one of the couple, a husband or wife, because the other one's having to watch the kids because they can't afford daycare. I mean, it just goes on and on. And then I'm looking at our district, my district, and I'm looking at specifically the two closures you spoke of. We're losing Hallmark tomorrow. I mean, it's closing at the Independent Center. The store's gone. And I've been out there and talked with some other stores, and they're in discussions of possibly closing their stores as well. So, you know, and I worry about Kohl's, I worry about Marshall's, I worry about all these great places to shop. And I hope that we, while we're optimistic, I think we really need a very aggressive stance on how we're going to begin to rebuild our revenue base in the city. And so I don't have answers. I have a lot of questions, and I know you and I talked before, and we know what's out there. We know what's coming. So I hope that with all of us that we begin to look at aggressive measures to reduce our spending. You know, I mean, at all levels. And I even hate the word furlough, but if we have to do that to keep ourselves out of financial trouble, we have to put everything on the table. I hope you agree with that. So I appreciate your report, and I just hope that we'll continue the discussion, that we just don't put it all on your shoulders, and that we'll all take the time to read and research and discover what our city can do, needs to do, and what we're willing to do.
Certainly, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Well, Ted, you know, some more dim future outlook. I know our community college here in Jackson County and Independence in the Kansas City area. I was on a call today with Chancellor Beatty, and their enrollment is down 13%. So I would venture to guess that most colleges and universities are down significantly in enrollment, and even those who may have started the fall semester with a higher enrollment, I know many college students are not returning this semester for a variety of reasons. Primarily, you know, of course, loss of income is a factor, but also just the environment of the virtual learning has caused a lot of college students to say, I'm just going to kind of take a break until we can get back to normal. That doesn't bode well for our job market either, because as Councilman Steinmeier has pointed out, many of the opportunities for those students, even if they're just on a break, just aren't there for people without some form of higher education. So something else that we should be keeping a close eye on, and certainly staying in close communication with our great community college that we're very fortunate to have in this city, and our high schools as well. But economic development obviously has to be a focus moving forward to do the best that we can to bring capital investment and job opportunities and workforce development and job training into our community. I just wanted to not pass over something very important, Mr. City Manager, which was the COVID emergency loan. I just wanted to make sure that everybody who's listening this evening or may watch the meeting later was sure to catch that. As many in the community probably recall, very early on, as we were amending the proposed budget between March and June, that the city manager had not presented but was in the process of preparing, the council authorized a $25 million emergency loan, or we might, you know, refer to as a line of credit from our utilities. The council previously had authorized cutting that from 25 million to 12.5 million. Now the city manager is going to bring that forward to cut that to 0. So that was, you know, the so we could sleep at night act, I think. But I'm incredibly impressed, and the CARES Act money certainly helped significantly. Some other unexpected pennies from heaven that we received, you know, from KCATA for our bus service and others, that we did not infiltrate one nickel, one penny of that $25 million. That money never was moved, transferred from one account to another. So I think that that is very, very good news, and a credit to you, Mr. City Manager, for managing the situation as well as you have been able to this point. Any other comments or questions on the forecast before we move on to capital improvements? Okay, then, Mr. City Manager, next is the preliminary 2022-2027 capital improvements program.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, as we do continue to shift our focus to preparation for the upcoming submission of the fiscal year 21-22 budget, a key component of that is our capital improvements plan. The city charter does have a process outlined and requires that this be first presented to the Planning Commission, who submits a recommendation then for consideration as part of the submitted budget. That kind of happens in the past in isolation. It isn't something that's always been highlighted. It's just been appended to the submitted budget and hasn't gotten a lot of fanfare. And because it's such a significant part of what we do and a significant expense that we incur, really wanted to make sure we start bringing more attention to that and have a truly robust 5-year capital improvements plan that we roll out to the council. So I think my staff's come up with a very creative way to present this to you tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our Finance Director, Brian Kidney, to provide further introduction.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, as City Manager has previously just said, it's part of an overall process of the budget. However, this year we wanted to put something together that you know, we could go back and explain to people. A lot of times people have questions, what exactly is the capital improvements program? So in your agenda this evening, in the packet, I did include the actual pieces of equipment and land and improvements. So you do have the list of those programs, but I did ask Samantha Morris, who works in the city manager's office, to put together just a presentation. It's using a software called Doodly. It looks kind of like a cartoon. And I'm going to have her go ahead and just make this presentation, show the video. It kind of explains it. It just gives a big picture of the program this year. And then afterwards, we can take questions if there's any specific items. So, Sam, I think Becky, she's going to need control.
Sam, you should be able to share it from your screen. There should be a share screen option.
The Capital Improvements Program, or CIP, is a major financial, public infrastructure, and equipment planning tool for municipalities. The CIP is a long-range plan that identifies capital projects and equipment, provides a planning schedule, and identifies options to fund the projects and equipment. The development of a CIP provides information regarding planned public improvements and equipment with anticipated funding. The CIP provides a link between the various master plans, the city's comprehensive plan, and the annual budget. The CIP is used to guide the city in preparing the next year fiscal budget. It further implements the visions, goals, and strategies of the Independence for All strategic plan and Imagine Independence 2040 comprehensive plan. The CIP sets forth proposed projects for constructing, maintaining, upgrading, and replacing the city's physical infrastructure and equipment necessary for continued operations, and providing city services during the next 6 fiscal years, beginning in June of 2021 through July of 2027. CIP contains 144 identified projects with a total projected cost of $147.6 million, including 79 active projects that are either in construction or undergoing planning and design. The category with the largest number of active projects in the next 2 years is the Municipal Services Division with 44 projects. For all projects estimated fiscal year 2021 through 2022, expenditures total approximately $39.4 million, and fiscal year 2022 through 2023, expenditures total approximately $37.6 million. Each year through the public safety sales tax, both fire and police purchase a number of new vehicles based on the most immediate needs of each department. For the fire department, the annual pumper replacement and aerial with equipment replacement will be required this year. The police department will maintain their vehicle replacement plan. Once purchased, the vehicles may be shifting through other departments and other assignments as needed. Vehicles are kept within the fleet as long as they are economically feasible to continue maintaining. The purchase of new vehicles and all of the equipment to be installed in each one, as well as any outsourced labor for the changeover of equipment from one vehicle to another with decals, is included in this plan. As a reminder, with some of our upcoming CIP projects, many are funded from different sales sources. Our street sales tax includes 25 total projects over the next 6 years. Some highlights for 2022 include the Truman Connected project, which will create a multimodal spine along major streets in Western Independence that connects transportation users of all types along 7.5 miles of roadway. The second project to highlight is the 24 Highway Complete Streets. This project will improve 24 Highway from River Boulevard to 291 Highway. A continuous center turn lane will be provided to improve safety. There will also be gutter and curbs installed on both sides of the street and include a 10-foot wide shared pedestrian and bicycle path. Our stormwater sales tax includes 22 total projects over the next 6 years with 5 active projects for 2022. A couple highlights for 2022 include Project 1, which is Leslie to Crane and Hereford Phase 1 and 2. This project will provide stormwater facilities in this residential neighborhood of the Crackerneck Creek watershed where there has been a history of flooding and erosion. The second project to highlight is the Rockwood Storm drainage improvements. Due to undersized culverts, eroded stream banks, and deteriorated storm drainage facilities, it has resulted in the need for over 3,500 feet of improvements in this area. The sanitary sewer sales tax has a total of 30 projects over the next 6 years. One highlighted project for 2022, which is also a multi-year project, is the Upper Adair Interceptor design. This particular project will reroute sanitary sewer flows crossing I-70 in the area southwest of I-70 and Nolan Road to reduce capacity issues. The lines will be rerouted, which will also prevent future breaks in this area. The Water Fund includes 34 projects over the next 6 years with 15 ongoing projects in 2022. Two of the highlighted projects we have going on in 2022 is the Courtney Bend Plant Emergency Generator. While this is a multi-year project, this project will increase the reliability of the city's water source in the event of an electrical power outage if it were to occur. This generator may also be used to reduce the demand of necessary energy provided to the plant. The second project to highlight is the Wellfield Electrical Improvements. A portion of the Courtney Bend plant wellfield overhead wiring was installed in the 1950s that has become less than optimum and repairs are becoming more frequent. Also within the 2022 Water Fund begins an aggressive main replacement program with several projects over the life of the CIP. Some projects include funding from multiple funding sources. For example, a major project beginning in 2022 is the Spring Branch Garage Complex that's planned to start in 2022 and being completed in 2024. Being funded 25% from the General Fund, Electric Fund, Water Fund, and the Water Pollution Control Fund. The Spring Branch Garage Complex will consolidate the former garages of Water Pollution Control and Public Works Streets and Fleet Maintenance into a single facility, providing a location for all 4 services for the Municipal Services Department. As a reminder, the CIP is not a static document, but rather a fluid document that can be changed as the infrastructure requirements change, development occurs, and funding opportunities become available. Projects listed in the CIP report are not necessarily listed in priority order and are not to be construed as a promise to any person or group that it will be completed within a specific time frame. Here are just a few of the exciting future projects we have coming. For a more detailed report on our CIP, please visit the city website /comdev/CIP.
So I want to thank Samantha Morris for putting that together for me. I think it kind of helps kind of perspective wise, and I really appreciate it. I know I kind of threw that on her, so she did a really good job. The process from here is this coming Thursday, this will be presented to the PUAB just for their consideration, for them to take a look at it. And then in 1st of March, this will be going to the Planning and Zoning meeting for their consideration as part of the charter, is that they actually make, they consider it and make sure that everything within this plan meets within the master plan of the city. Then again, during the budget process, we'll be taking input from obviously the council, and then bringing it back to the governing body as part of the budget process. So again, I had the actual detailed list in the budget package or in the council packages. If you have any specific questions on any of the projects, I know the department heads are here to answer any questions. And but I'm here available if there's any process questions or anything.
I do have a question. Well, one thing I noted when I was looking through it earlier, I just think it's worth pointing out is how many funds that we have leveraged through grant programs. You know, those are very competitive, and we've traditionally done a pretty good job of leveraging TAP, CMAQ, you know, all these acronyms that we're familiar with. And that allows us to do some of these improvements that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. So I think that's important to include. I guess my question, Brian or Zach, is, yeah, there's a number of utilities projects, but there's also, which, you know, I think it's fine and appropriate for the PUAB to take a look at those. But there's also a number of public safety projects that we're using public safety sales tax for. There's a number of streets projects that we're using streets tax for, or leveraging streets tax for a match. So if we're going to take that step, which I'm always in favor of, then I think that those oversight committees should get an opportunity to look at these as well before they come forward to the council. I know the Planning Commission approval is required, and we may have some challenges with timing on that, but you know, I would really recommend and ask that the Streets Oversight Committee, Stormwater Oversight Committee, and our Public Safety Oversight Committees also at least have an opportunity to have that presentation as well for the projects of the taxes that they oversee in addition to the PUAB.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that's a step we've taken in the past, but I think it's a good idea, and just gives more visibility. And then, so when these projects come up to be approved through appropriation processes, that they know that they were planned for and that they're coming.
Absolutely, I think that's a great idea, and it is exactly what this process is for, is discussion and planning purposes.
And I think it's remarkable how much that cartoon actually looked like the city manager.
I noticed that too. Yeah.
Other comments or questions from the council on the capital improvements program? I mean, there's obviously a lot more eyeballs to we'll see this many more times before it's approved, but I think this is a great starting point. So are there other comments or questions? Okay. If we're done with this presentation, then we will move on, Becky, to boards and commissions report.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't have my microphone on.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Under municipal services, I've noticed, you know, this is really the first time we've combined water, stormwater, streets, all under municipal services. And it would really help me if we could subdivide within the municipal services category the traditional categories we're all used to seeing, like for streets and for stormwater and for sanitary sewer, things of that nature. And then I noticed under municipal services, there's a lot of other debt. And I don't know what other debt means. It doesn't really identify the funding source. So my suggestion is that we identify the funding source. And that's the only place I really saw it. Maybe it's other places too, but I think those two things would greatly aid me in understanding it. So that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason I included two different reports. One was by department, and then the other one was by funding source. But I think I can run this report also, the department one, and then also run it by those specific things that you're speaking about. But if you want to see what exactly comes from each funding source, that's that second report. But I agree. I think this report would probably be more helpful if we also had that broke down by street and different types. So I'll work. I'm not exactly sure if I can get that program to do it, but I'll give that a try. I certainly hear what you're saying. I believe the other debt that's being referred to is a portion of that $17 million
loan
program that we did last year. So
the
I
loan
believe,
we took.
yeah. So if you're looking at that Highway 24 Phase 2, I believe that is the other debt, and that could be coming from that. Or if Lisa, I believe, is on the call, she may have something more up to date on that, but I believe that's included in there.
You're right, Brian. It is. Yep,
ahead,
it's the mini bond against the street sales tax that's funding those specific programs that are lined out as other debt.
Okay, so maybe if we subcategorize it, it'll jump right out at me then. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So this was probably going back to earlier on. I kind of missed that. The $12 that we get monthly on, is that the rider on the environmental project that we had to do on I'm sorry, on sanitary sewer several years ago?
As I understand it, we entered into a consent judgment
Right.
because we had a problem with pollution.
At the plant.
Right.
I'm sorry,
So it
I'm
was-
a little fuzzy because it's been a while ago, but is that the 12? And then we put in a rider on the utility bill to cover that because it was, it was an unanticipated expense. They came in and said, you gotta fix this and this is how much it's gonna cost, and we had to find a way to fund it. Is that the $12, Dan? Okay, so if we're only collecting that when we bill people instead of every month, and that doesn't stack up on people. I mean, if they're 2 months behind and we still get $12, not 24 or whatever, how's that gonna does that have any impact on our ability to pay that, or would we have to make any adjustment on that?
Hopefully that's a Brian question.
Okay,
Yeah,
I don't expect an answer. It just occurred to me when we were talking about, you know, sewer, that we had to do that, and I didn't know if that was in the capital improvement or if that was that $12 on the utility bill rider that we put on to pay for that. But
yeah, I'm gonna have to follow up with Dan and his
okay.
staff a little bit about how that billing comes out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anything else on capital improvement? Okay. Okay, now Becky, I think we're ready for your board and commission report.
Thank you. Excuse me. Tonight we have the Southwest Independence 353 board. Recommendations been made to appoint Conrad Lamb. If there's no objections, we'll add a resolution to the next agenda.
Okay, is there any objection?
I don't, Madam Mayor, I don't know that I have an objection. I do have a couple questions regarding this appointment.
Yes.
I asked Becky to forward to me, you know, the applicants that she received. There was 18, which 2 don't live in Independence. And I clarified if that was a problem or not, and I was told no. Out of all of them that I looked at, there was probably 2 or 3 that we should probably have given some serious consideration to, that live in Independence. And so before we're, you know, I can understand wanting, you know, we need to fill our committees vacancies, but if we have opportunity to fill it with Independence residents first, I think that they should be given the first opportunity to serve. And like I said, going through the list of 18, to me, there was 2 or 3 that deserved or warranted some further discussion or consideration. That was my concern.
Okay, we had a lot of great applicants. We had an abundance of applicants for this particular board. This is a project in the 4th district, so I don't know if Councilman Hobart wants to weigh in on it, but you know, we had a lot of great applicants, and the requirement is that they're a property owner in the 353 Southwest 353 area.
And just to clarify, the individual that they're recommending is a Lee Summit resident, former Lee Summit employee, and he owns a couple properties in Independence, but a lot of people do. So like I said, if we just didn't have a lot of choices, but we have an abundance, and looking through them, I think there was a couple that should be maybe given some consideration, that are Independence residents, longtime residents.
Okay. Is there consensus to move this forward to the next council agenda?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very good. That concludes our meeting tonight. I would just ask for, if the council doesn't object, I just have kind of a public service announcement to make that's fairly time sensitive. So we are continuing to do COVID testing on Saturdays at the Independence Athletic Complex. These are saliva-based tests. They are self-administered, which is the testing that we have done throughout this time that we've had the ability to do testing. This batch of tests were ones that we were able to acquire through the Mid-America Regional Council through some funding that they had available. This past Saturday was our 3rd Saturday doing it. The first 2 were quite busy. We had every appointment filled, and we had pretty good participation. This past Saturday, we had a noticeable drop off in that. So we're trying to ascertain why that might be. And we ask people to sign up in advance. We don't do that too terribly far in advance. We normally open that up on Thursday for Saturday testing, because otherwise we find people either, if they have to wait too long, they go get another test someplace else, and we want to make sure that we're able to administer as many tests as possible once people sign up. So I just wanted to say that to let people know that we have capacity to do this testing. It's free. You get your results. We tell you 24 to 48 hours, but many times people, if they test early in the day, they may even get their results later that day. So we've had a tremendous turnaround from the lab that we're working with. And I would just encourage folks, if you, to take advantage of that opportunity. Testing is still very, very important to this whole process. I know everybody's excited about vaccines, but those are, you know, as we all know, the supply chain on that is, and logistics are difficult, and there are not enough vaccines for everybody who wants one right now, but we do still have testing available and encourage people to take advantage of that opportunity. If you, certainly if you're symptomatic, if you've been in contact with somebody who is positive or symptomatic, we have these tests available, and we want to make sure that they get utilized. And we have that until mid-February. We were thinking that this might be our final week doing the testing, but we'll continue to do it as long as we have tests available. So just want to make people aware of that. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Mayor, very quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't do this. My presentation tonight was aided greatly by our new budget manager, Erica Benitez, and I wanted to make sure I introduced her to the council and to the community, as that will be playing a critical role in the next few months getting that submitted. So we're excited to have Erica on board. She and her family are relocating here from California. So she's working on Central Time Zone from the West Coast, which we appreciate that as well. But I'm very grateful to have her. I'm excited to be able to formally welcome her here in person to Independence. So that's all I had tonight, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Erica. We're happy to have you. I've had an opportunity to work with Erica a little bit already, and she's doing a terrific job. We can't wait to get you here into the Midwest, where the Chiefs will be playing in the Super Bowl, in case the word didn't get out to California. So if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned this evening. Thank you.